For ready when you are.
Yeah. All right.
All right, thank you, everyone. We called the meeting to order this evening at 6 p.m. and immediately went into executive session. I'd like to start the meeting by reminding everyone of as our practice, the mission and vision of the district. Our mission is to create a culture of academic excellence through inclusive and innovative learning opportunities for the whole child. Our vision is to empower all learners to reach their full potential in a globally competitive world. Could you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we move on with the agenda, I'd like to share that on Tuesday morning, November 14th, 2024, a charter bus carrying students from Tusky Valley High School to the Ohio School Board Association conference was rear-ended by a semi-truck on Ohio Highway 70, leaving 6 people dead, 3 students, and 18 others injured. Our hearts and thoughts go out to Tusky Valley community for the loss they are experiencing. We are one large school family in Ohio, and we are connected as members of the Ohio School Board Association. We want the Tusky Valley community to know that their Sycamore family supports them and is thinking about them during this tragic time. Please join me in a moment of silence to remember those who lost their lives in this terrible accident. We mourn them and send our deepest condolences to the Tusky Valley community for their loss. Thank you. Thank you. In lieu of the tragic accident, I wanted to propose before we make a motion for the agenda that we table the update about our OSBA conference experience until the next meeting, just to give some time and space. So I'd like to move that we strike that item from our agenda.
Second that motion.
So can we, Mrs. Logan, can you take the roll call for the approval of the revised agenda?
Mr. Comerford,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, could I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Logan, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye. Motion passes. Do we have any public participation requests online or in person?
We did not, other than the person who reached out, and it was actually a Sycamore in a different state that wanted to speak at a meeting. So it was an error. We have no one in our community who has contacted us.
I'm glad we were open to hearing from them.
Yes.
They declined,
Yes.
so be it. Moving forward, next we have 2 presentations I'm excited to hear about. I know we all are. First is the child nutrition update.
So we'll invite Mr. Lovell
Mr.
up
Lovell,
to.
could you come up and introduce the topic?
Yes, absolutely. And as much as I'd like to give the presentation, I have somebody here that is way better equipped to do that for you. It is my privilege to be able to introduce you all to Mrs. Liz Wellman. As you know, Mrs. Warren left us to go back home up to Springboro this past year, and we were fortunate enough to be able to bring Liz into that position. And Liz is actually a familiar face to you all. I think you've met her at some of the retreats, but just to give you some background, she did serve as our field supervisor here at Sycamore, actually during the pandemic, I believe. So I'm sure that was a very fun time for her. And so when we posted the position, she had applied and we were very excited. So she has been doing just a phenomenal job carrying the torch of Mrs. Warren, but also thinking different about child nutrition in our new facilities. So I'm going to pass this off to her, invite her up here. to do her presentation, but just wanted to give a quick moment to recognize her.
Thanks, Mr. Lovell.
Guys, hi, I'm Liz, obviously new this year. I am actually here today presenting for information from last school year. So please bear with me. I might not know all the answers to what happened last school year, but I'll give you the best that I possibly can. I'm ready for you, CeeLo. Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is due to Ohio Revised Code. The revised code basically installs regulations on every Board of Education to adopt policies that specific types of foods and beverages are served within nutrition guidelines and that they're served at specific times throughout the school day. So to talk a little bit more about that, make it not sound like legal jargon. The school day can be defined as starting at midnight the day before to 30 minutes after the school day ends. And that will define your actual school day and the time that you are serving your meals. Following the nutrition standards, these are actually called Smart Snack Guidelines. And it breaks down the foods and the beverages that you can sell and what that emphasizes. So for the food portion of it, it's emphasizing those whole grains. You're going to have your fresh fruits and vegetables at every meal, and then low-fat dairy options. It's also limiting things like calories, sugars, saturated fats, and sodiums, making sure that those foods that we're serving are actually within guidelines and are healthy for our students. So this isn't just foods that are sold in our cafeterias. These are foods in our vending machines, in our stores, sold at class parties, things like that. So I do want to emphasize very specifically, these are foods sold in schools. There's regulation on sales. There's not regulation on food and beverages that we give to our students. So that's a very big distinguishing factor. I'm a nutrition nerd, and I think this is really cool. Something that I think a lot of people don't know is that the foods that we sell in our schools are specifically formulated to be within those guidelines. So this is just a little bit of an example, a very small one. On the left is actually the nutrition facts for a Doritos sold at Kroger. On the right is Doritos sold in schools. It's probably a little small for you, but basically what it's showing is that there's 20 less calories, 3 less grams of fat, and 10 less grams of sodium in this bag of Doritos. A very small example, but every single food that we are serving in schools has been formulated to be within those guidelines. So I think that's really cool. Beverages, on the other hand, yes, there are still guidelines on those. Pretty much what they're telling us is milk, water, and juice are fine. We can serve them at any age level, especially that 100% juice component. At the 9 through 12 level, that's where we start adding a lot more beverages. So we can add those caffeinated beverages like coffee, like we're selling in our coffee bar this year. You can add carbonated beverages as long as there's 0 sugar. So adding those sodas to our students in that level. Everything, again, is following that calorie component and that added sugar component. So everything has to be below a certain calorie level. Everything has to be below a certain added sugar level. In summary, we are compliant. Ultimately, Kelsey Warren was a registered dietitian. I also went to school to be a dietitian. We work tirelessly to make sure that the foods that we're serving to our kids are not only nutritionally fit, but also that they're within those guidelines. We do everything we can to make sure we have what we can. Switching gears a little bit. So child nutrition, as I'm sure most of you know, is a separate entity. We are fiscally independent of the district. We are a self-sustaining program, basically a small business within the school district. What that means is that we don't take money from the general fund, and we make and continue through our service just by the funds that we make selling meals. So to kind of break this down with a little bit less detail, last school year, we started the year with about $1.6 million. We ended the school year with a little bit less than $1.8 million for a total cash profit of $135,000. You may see in here that we did have a fiscal year loss of a little over $1 million, and that really factors in for the revenue and expenses that you'll see. So revenue specifically, where we're making that from is from reimbursements from the government for every meal that our students are eating, from a la carte sales for our snacks and drinks, and from catering events that we put on the district. A big part of that is really why you see that loss in our financial records, because the USDA in previous years, prior to last school year, had a waiver in place that all meals could be free for all students. That ended last school year. What that meant during that period of time when meals were all free for all students is that for every meal that was sold, we got a reimbursement from the government for $2.46 for every breakfast. We got a reimbursement for $4.32 for every lunch that was sold. After that ended, we went back to guidelines prior to that. What that means is it's based on income and if families apply for the free and reduced meal program. So as you can see on this slide, there's tiered reimbursement pricing. So for every free student, we'll get $2.26 who's on the program. Whereas for every denied student, we're only getting 50 cents back. That really shows right there how we have to keep our food costs down and how we have to make sure our revenue and our expenses are equivalent. Overall, basically what it says is our reimbursement total went down a lot, but we also had a lot of money that we had made in previous years due to those free meals. So we spent some. The way we spent it is improvements. We improved on that capital improvement plan, just like the whole district has been doing. We invested in new technology, not only for nutrition compliance software, but new registers. We're getting new computers for our supervisors who have very antique computers, I'll be honest with you. We upgraded signage at Green Junior High and High School with the new remodels. Actually, junior high will be done next week, so it's part of that. We also replaced a lot of old equipment. And then just like you guys see when you go to Kroger, we've seen an increase in food and supply costs. We're seeing it like crazy. So that took away from some of the spending that we did for fun. Okay, so tying into that, we talked a lot about free and reduced percentage and eligibility. So as you can see at the bottom of the slide, Sycamore sits pretty much around 11%. 1920 was an outlier. It was an outlier for every school district. Unprecedented things happened. So the way I look at this is 11% of our students are eating at that free and reduced meal price. Whereas the 89% of them that are not on our program, whether it be because they're not applying or because they make too much money to be on the program, they're paying that full price and we're only seeing a specific amount of reimbursement from that. Okay, breaking it down just a little bit. This is our average participation at breakfast time. This has decreased quite a lot from the previous year. However, you'll see 515 breakfasts on average per day. I'll break that down a little bit more in the next slide. 10% might seem like a really low percentage of participation at breakfast time. However, that's also very common in schools. There's been an initiative the last couple of years to try and increase breakfast participation throughout Ohio, throughout the United States. It is something in our goals for the next few years. But the way I look at this is 85,000 students, over 85,000 students, ate breakfast with us in the morning time, and they had the nutrients necessary to be successful in the classroom. This is breaking it down daily or by school, I apologize. You can see that some of those numbers are over the hundreds in the breakfast time, whereas Montgomery is 18. So it's all about income value. It's all about how much we're promoting our program in those schools. It's about how much we're putting into those programs. So obviously our goals are to increase participation. Last year we fell a little bit short, but again, like I said, it is very common that breakfast is less participated than lunches. So for lunch data, 2,400 meals daily is our average. That's great. So we're a district of about 5,500 kids, more or less. That's about half. 45% is huge. You do not see that very frequently. That means the kids like the meals that we're serving and they're coming back. It also shows me 402,000 kids came and got a meal for the nutrients to be successful in the classroom. That's amazing. Again, breaking it down by school, as you can see, the high school Green, they like to be combative for who can do the best. Green is winning this year. But again, you see 59% at EH Green. That is so great to see. Sure, there's a decrease in participation because meals aren't free for all students, but we're still hitting a lot of our students. We're still reaching out and getting them the nutrients that they need. Okay, I'm done with last year. I'm going to share with you guys a couple new updates from this school year, just because I'm excited about them and want you to know what's going on. So a couple different levels here. Two things happening financially that are amazing. This year, the state of Ohio temporarily approved the direct certification, so basically direct eligibility without application for any student that's on Medicaid. That means we're hitting a huge percentage of families that would not or may not have applied previously, and they're getting free meals automatically. So that's amazing. Something else that the USDA did is they are picking up the cost of reduced meals. So what that means is every kid that's free and every kid that's reduced is paying $0 at the register. The state is actually reimbursing us that extra cost that we weren't getting previously for that reduced kid. So we're hitting more students. Our participation has gone up. We're seeing a higher percentage of our students on the free and reduced meal program. It's been really, really great. For our meals, we are focusing on two really big things this year. One of them is the last 2 years we've been working on new cooking and preparation styles. Our emphasis this year has been quality instead of quantity. So getting those fresher ingredients, making sure that we're putting fresh fruits and vegetables out every day, that we're using whole chicken and not the chicken patties that look like a circle that you ate when you were a kid. The other thing we've been trying to integrate a little bit more is half scratch recipes. I define half scratch as taking a frozen chicken patty and adding fresh ingredients, using seasonings instead of salts, and making it a recipe. So that's something that we're having a really fun time with, actually. One other thing that we rolled out for the first time last year is a Bippy Bop showcase. If you don't know Bippy Bop, it's similar to Chipotle. They emphasize gluten-free and clean label eating. They started out at our high school last week, I apologize. And we actually saw on our main line, we normally serve about 250 at the most. We saw almost 400 kids coming through. So that's amazing. Not only did we get a ton of really good feedback from students, but parents are reaching out. We have a ton of engagement on social media. We're doing it again in 6 weeks if you want to come down. So really exciting. And then the last thing that's going on, we've been working on updating our food allergy and dietary restrictions policies. Something near and dear to my heart. I am someone with food allergies. My counterpart is also someone with food allergies and someone that is the craziest, best eater you'll ever meet. So we've really been working on tightening up our procedures, making sure not only are parents well informed, but that students feel comfortable to eat in our cafeterias just like they would at home. So that's a really big thing that we're really trying to work on, trying to make it the best we can possibly be. And here's just a couple of pictures. Some of these you might have seen last year, but I love them and I love to show you things that are happening. So this is not only Bippy Bop, but this is the fresh fruits and vegetables. That's actually a whole muscle chicken patty that we integrated this year, rather than, again, those circle patties that you used to eat in school. This next one is just experiences that have been going on. So obviously I talked about Bippy Bop. It's a very, very exciting thing for our kids. Top right is actually National School Lunch Week. Green brought in a couple celebrities, one of which was Mr. Red Legs. National School Lunch Week is a way to get kids excited, and they were very, very excited. The one on the bottom is actually a continuation of a project that was started by a student last school year at Mapledale. She submitted a persuasive essay asking why we can't serve Subway in schools. So we took that and we ran with it, and we have created an Aves Way experience where they're creating their own sub to order at the elementary level, and now it's on a rotation basis in all of the schools. So that little kid, she's very excited, and so are the rest of our kids in our other buildings as well. Okay, here is just building relationships. I don't know how well you know these people up here, but they're very excited. The culture at the high school is amazing. We work so closely with our administrators. Obviously, we love dressing up. We love getting kids excited. At Halloween this year, we had all the lights off and there was a disco ball going and there was music going. We're really getting excited, getting everyone together. So that's fun. This one is actually, again, some pictures from last year. Something that we've been doing is integrating celebrity chefs. So bringing in administrators, bringing in people from the district office into the schools and helping not only to serve, but to talk to the students and get them excited about school lunch. And last thing I will bother you with is something that we rolled out last year as well. Brad Lovell and I, well, and Kelsey and I now have been working very closely with our kitchen supervisors to create leadership training documents. So this is not only to better culture in the kitchens, but to better culture as a whole, and to ensure that they have the tools to be the best managers, to ask the right questions, to be emotionally intuitive and understand how we run this kitchen and how we make sure that the students are happy, everyone's happy in the kitchen, we're coming back every day. So that's all I have.
Thank you for a fantastic update. Your enthusiasm is actually contagious. So very well
Thank
done.
you. Thank you.
Anyone on the board have any questions?
I want that chicken sandwich.
I know.
Come get it.
I'm hungry.
Anything else? Yeah, thank you so much.
Ms. Wellman, I do have one question. You mentioned a couple of times that the funding has gone away, or the automatic free lunch.
Yep.
I know you sit on some professional groups, and is there any discussion about that coming back, or
There's
nothing?
constant discussion, sorry. Ultimately, I don't think so.
Okay.
Truthfully, what ended up happening at the end of it is I think the state ran out of funds. I think their way of combating that is by doing the Medicaid for Ohio, by doing pickup for reduced meal prices. I think ultimately they're trying, but the influx of meals that we sold that year was tenfold throughout the entire United States. We couldn't keep up. Food costs were crazy. We were running out of trays, could not keep up. Yes, absolutely. We want meals to be free for all kids. I think it was just really hard to facilitate long-term.
I just want to say thank you for your leadership, all the changes that you've made, and just the positivity that I know Mrs. Warren did a great job as well, but you're adding your own flavor to the kitchens with the entire staff. And
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate how you've jumped in and, so quickly, and bringing some of this exciting change to our school district, and really meeting the students' needs and listening to their voice and giving them a voice in the kitchen. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we're having fun.
Can I ask you one quick
Yep.
question? I am on the steering committee for Sycamore Bridges.
Okay.
And one of the topics that comes up a lot is food insecurity for our kids. And I just wanted to let you know that we have Sycamore Bridges. So I don't know
Yeah.
if accounts are, I know this is really wonderful news about the Medicaid. That's excellent. If people can get enrolled, if they, whether they're not knowing it or not, they're going to get that lunch. This is
Yes.
wonderful.
Yeah.
But I just want you to know that in the event that there are students whose accounts are not being met in
Okay.
some way, we do have Sycamore Bridges in our district that can potentially help with these types of resources. So please know that.
Absolutely. That's very helpful. Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Next on the agenda, item 6B, the 5-year forecast with Mrs. Logan.
Thank you. And I wish she would have gone after me. I'm going to try to keep up with the positivity with the finances. I will say this is the first time that I am with you as we're talking through the 5-year forecast. So I'm excited to be here and talk through this. I have been here now for over 100 days. So there's more to learn, but I do feel like stepping into the discussion of the 5-year forecast, preparing for this, I've learned so much more about Sycamore. And so I'm happy to share with you some of the details. And so let's get started. So the purpose of the 5-year forecast, like, why are we talking about this right now? Well, I'm going to go to the very last bullet. We have to legally. So every November and May, boards of education must adopt a 5-year forecast, and you have to file it with the state. It used to, I'm not sure if you knew this, but the rules used to just say school districts had to file twice a year. It did not say that it had to be a board approved 5-year forecast. That is now a rule. So It's on the agenda. I think most districts already put it on the agenda for approval, but just making sure that I, talk about that. Go back. Sorry. The other thing I want to bring up is it isn't just the general fund that it's included in the 5-year forecast. Any debt associated with the general fund is also included in this debt. So I just kind of made a note. We have some energy conservation debt. We have the district office debt associated with that, and Blue Ash Elementary. So those debt service payments are also included in the 5-year forecast. The other thing I want to mention is this is a snapshot financial report as of November 15th, 2023. When things change and the assumptions change, the numbers change. So I want to jump into the revenue side of the 5-year forecast with our largest revenue item, which is real estate tax revenue. So I think everybody knows, you've probably been notified from Hamilton County on what it looks like your actual home value should increase by. We are estimating for our school district, overall residential property values will go up by 20%. The collection year, when we'll start seeing that revenue, is in the second half of this fiscal year. So it's a calendar year 2024 when we will actually see that. Even though the increases in value will go up by 20%, when you look at the line item in the revenue for fiscal year 24 and 25, we are predicting a little less than 2% in increases in revenue. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So why is that? If our tax values go up by 20%, why aren't we seeing 20% more in revenue? It is because of, in Ohio, we have something called House Bill 920, which was put in effect in the 70s when we were seeing double-digit increases in values like we're seeing now. And what happens is, as values increase, your millage, your rates decrease so that relatively you collect the same amount from your taxes. So we'll go to the next slide. So I thought it was important to just kind of break that down for Sycamore. So if you look at the tax rates that are being collected for calendar year 2023, it breaks down like this. We have inside mills, which is 4.63. That does not decrease. We see inflationary increase from 4.63 mils for Sycamore. And that is true with all jurisdictions. Any entity who receives taxes, you get some inside millage and you receive growth on that. Everything else that you're going to see here is impacted by House Bill 920 and sees a reduction in the millage. So if you take all of the levies from 1976 and before, there's 28.12 voted mills there. We're collecting less than 6. So there's the effect of House Bill 920. As you continue down through there and you get to the last operating levy that we have, which was in 2016, you're going to see that the full rate is over 70 mils, but we're collecting less than 31. So it kind of shows you for Sycamore, what is that impact of House Bill 920? Then we're going to move down to bond levies, because we also have bond levies, which we are collecting from our taxpayers. And you're going to see that it's a total of 3.75 that were collected this year. I also want to point out that when the levy was planned, the bond levy was planned back in 2019, the predicted millage was 4.4 mils. So we're collecting less there as well. So there's some good news, right? 3.75. So total collected mills are 34.5 mils. When you take a look at 20% increase in residential values, how was that going to impact that 30.76. We're estimating that the millage could reduce another 4.4 mils. So the 30.76 would go down for 2024 collection period. Bond levies, they're actually collecting the information. Beth Weber is actually involved in that process now since she works for Hamilton County Auditor. And so she's collecting information, and we will find out probably in the next month or so what that bond millage, but that could reduce as well. And just for informational purposes, 1 mil for Sycamore generates $2.4 million for the school district. So now I'm going to move on to state funds. What do we receive in state funds? So at the very top, you're going to see a phase-in schedule. We now have a new way that schools are funded in the state of Ohio, and it's called the Fair School Funding Plan. It's supposed to be a 6-year phase-in. It started in fiscal year 22, and you'll see that phase-in amount. It should be fully funded in 2027, but we are in fiscal year 2024 right now, and this state operates with 2-year, so biennium budgets. So in this forecasted period, we are forecasting for 3 biennial budgets. I just want to point that out, which is a little difficult. So you have to make some assumptions. So in this forecast, we are assuming the phase-in at 67%. We are not assuming that the state will fully phase in the Fair School Funding Plan, although I think it will be very difficult for them to say no, but we are not assuming that. We are sticking with and stopping with the 67% funding of the new Fair School Funding Plan. We are also assuming 57 or 52 additional students per year, which is the average increase that we've seen the previous 5 years. But I also want to note that in this fiscal year, when you take a look at that district educated enrollment number, we're up by 179 students. We also will have we've got an enrollment study that will be forthcoming, and we'll know more when we receive that. The other thing I wanted to point out before we move away from the students, in which Liz highlighted this, is our economically disadvantaged student count. So she mentioned that direct cert now is included in free and reduced. So when you look at our economically disadvantaged percent of our students, last year, 10.5% of our students were economically disadvantaged. When you look at this year for FY24, as they're including that direct cert, it increases to 16.4%. So while it doesn't mean a whole lot more money to us from the state for a general fund, it does speak to the demographics of our student population. So these 2 charts, I have 2 charts on here to speak to total revenue overall when you look at the 5-year forecast, which includes advances in. If you recall, we advanced quite a bit of money to our construction projects. We are anticipating those advances to come back to us in 25 and 26. So that's why that top graph, you're going to see some big jumps in 24 and 25, or 25 and 26. And then in 27, you see that decrease. What I wanted to do is to just extract our operating revenues and to say, what does it look like year over year for just operating revenues for the district? And so you can kind of see when we talked about the I don't want to see big increase, the increase we're seeing in state revenue for this district in 24 and 25, you see that on these charts on those bars for 24 and 25. And then you're also going to see 26 through 28, because we're not including the fully phase in, that it's dropping down. But it's a better picture, I believe, of what is actually happening with our revenue when you extract out those advances in. So now we're going to move to the expenditure side of the 5-year forecast. So these are notable. This is not all of the assumptions. I'm just pointing out the notable. So our salaries and benefits are our largest expenditures for the general fund. So for wages, our OPSI contract, which was just negotiated, runs through 2026, and that included a 60-cent an hour base wage increase, which equates to a 2.5% increase. And there is also a 0.6% step increase that happens annually. And this is carried through 2028. For our teachers, that contract actually expires at the end of this year. So we will be negotiating in the spring. So there are assumptions in this forecast that are for planning purposes only. And I just want to point out that what's included in this forecast is what was included in the May forecast, which is 2% for 2025 through 2028. This year, it was 2.5%, which is in the contract. There's also a 1.8% step increase that is also included when you look at overall wages. For healthcare rates, we will see a 6% increase in that effective January 1, 2014. We just went through open enrollment, which Dr. Davis led us through this week as well. Moving forward, we're estimating a 5% for those rates. But I want to point out, previous 2 years, last year was 17.9% increase. The year before that was 9% increase. So we have seen some big increases. Our operating transfers out, what you're going to see in the forecast for this year, your PI fund, $3.6 million in this year, and $4.1 million for the remainder of that forecast. There's also $135,000 annually that is predicted to transfer to the athletic funds, and that has been the trend. So when you look at total expenditures and how those break down, our personnel, which is no surprise, we are a service business and we are a people business. So 84% of our operating expenditures goes to personnel. When you take a look at and you include those transfers out, it reduces down to 81%. This is kind of like what we did for the revenue pieces. What does our total expenditures look like with those transfers to our PI and our athletic? And then what do they look like if you extract those out and only look at operations? So the top graph is showing that in 2023, there were a lot of transfers that happened. And so in 2024, this year, we're making less transfers. That's why you see that dip there. If you look at that bottom graph and you go to 2024, you're going to see actually for operating expenditures, it's an increase. So I just like to look at that bottom graph when I'm trying to look at how are our expenditures growing. The bottom graph is a better reflection of that. When we talk about transfers out, I wanted to include this chart, which is the planning that we are doing for our capital needs in this district. It includes our buildings as well as technology. And you're going to see those buckets there for by year, for roofing, for technology, for transportation, and on and on. So I thought it was important to include this chart to show you our planning, which is a work in progress and ongoing, but to also show you how we came up with the 4.1 million. annually. It is an average of the 5 years. So if you take a look at the needs and you average those out, it's 4.184 million. 4.1 million is included in the transfer outline for PI and 135. Just to equate this back, if we go back and think about how much does 1 mil generate for Sycamore? Do you remember? $2.4 million. So if we take a look at the 4.1 million that we're transferring to the PI fund annually, it equates to 1.7 mils. So just to kind of put it in context. There you go. That's a fun fact. Yeah. Yes.
Can I ask you just for clarification,
Yes.
back on the slide, 84% of operating expenses is personnel. Can you just explain to our community, when you say personnel, what does that comprise? It's not just salaries, but it's retirement contribution, it's healthcare. Is there anything else that's
Yes.
comprised of?
So this is going to be salaries and benefits. So it's all salaries and of all employees in the district. And then benefits are going to include the 14% that by law we must contribute to the retirement for our members in STRS, and 10% that goes to SERS for our classified folks. It's all of the insurances that we pay for the board share, which is 85% for full-time employees. It's also workers' comp that we pay for. It's any unemployment claims that we pay for. And so that's all included in that figure there too. Mhm. So the other thing I wanted to just kind of point out to kind of going along that line of operating versus the numbers, including the transfers and advances. So what I tried to do here is to take a look at how are we doing revenues versus expenditures, and are we in a spending surplus or a spending deficit? So what the first chart shows is actual going back to 2019 through last year. And the red is showing where the deficit comes into play. And you're going to notice in 2022, when you include the advances and transfers in that line, we actually saw a spending deficit. But I also want to move you down to the bottom chart, which is what we're predicting. So when you take out the transfers and advances, we actually would see that on operating only a deficit in 2026. So it just helps you look at things a little bit differently in a different way. But we are in a spending deficit. So we have decisions to make and things to talk about when you get into that situation, because what happens here is when you start getting into a spending deficit situation, you're drawing down on your cash. So when we take a look and we pull it all together and we say revenues, expenses, and cash, how are we looking? So putting it all on one chart, your blue are your total revenues, red is your expenditures, and you always want your blue bar to be above your red bar. And so you'll see here in 2023, the red bar overtakes the blue bar, and it continues that way. You'll see the green line depicts our cash, which is what I talked about. When you start getting into that spending deficit, you start drawing down on that cash. So you will also notice that the cash starts to decrease. And then the yellow line, I thought it was important to continue to talk about in board policy that we have a cash balance goal of 25% of our operating expenditures, which equates to about $25 million. So I put the yellow bar on there just so you could see, when does that happen? And that happens in 2028. So not only are we seeing a spending deficit, but we are also seeing that a situation where that cash goes to a point that's below our goal that has been set in policy.
Mrs. Logan, just a quick
Yes.
question. That's assuming that all the assumptions, like health insurance, stay at 5%, which the last 2 years have not.
I'm going to go back to the very first slide. This is a snapshot financial report that is dated November 15th, 2023, based on assumptions. And so exactly what you said, as we know more, the assumptions will change and the numbers will change.
Mhm.
This is a long range financial planning tool. And so it helps us look forward and say, if those things happened, here's what the financial picture would look like, and we have decisions to make. So it's a proactive way, but you're exactly right, Mr. Lewis. It is assuming that all of those things come true. The only thing I know is that they will not. So not everything is going to come true. So in summary, in February, we get to talk about things again, and we're going to do a deeper dive. We're going to dig into more of these numbers and talk about them more fully. The additional state funding is included in this forecast for 2024 and 25. We talked about that last month and what that looks like. Just for this year, it's $2 million more. But the two additional biennium budgets that are included in this forecast, we do not have it assumed that they will continue the phase-in. Additional data that we look forward to for the next time we talk about the 5-year forecast is we have an enrollment study that's coming up. We have negotiations and we have a strategic plan update that's coming up, which will all impact this. Our facilities plan is nearing completion. And so we're going to know more about how this is impacted by all of that. But the last bullet, the long-term financial sustainability of Sycamore is always the goal, right? And so all of these pieces come into play with that discussion. And so I feel like we are in a good spot, that we have some tools to look at. The state has helped us for the next 2 years. We don't know that they're going to help us continuing, but it kind of gives us time to press pause, to take a look at the picture and to decide what options are in front of us and what we need to do moving forward. So questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Logan. This
Yes.
is an excellent presentation as well. I had a couple of comments, observations,
Yes.
but overall, I thought this was very clear. I particularly like the slide that says notable revenue assumptions, that shows the effective rate, the inside mills. If you could go back to that slide maybe for a second. One of the observations I have on that slide is that the full rate operating mills in 1976 was 28.12. And we have a very good chance after the property valuations come in to have an effective rate that's lower than our rate in 1976.
That is that's an observation that is, yes, that's
If we
awesome.
talk about explaining good stewardship of money, highlighting that and right now it's 30.76, so it's slightly higher than the 28.12, but after the property valuations have come up, I think you referenced about perhaps a 4 mil drop. That would say that our effective millage rate is lower next year than it was in 1976 and all years since. I think that's a tremendously powerful statement to be able to make to our community. So I just wanted to highlight that observation.
Mhm.
The second point on here is that I do believe that I think you did a really good job outlining the property values versus tax rates, because my observation is that most people believe that when their property values go up, that the schools are getting their, if you will, fair share of that property value appreciation. most people believe that's the case, and it's not. And
Correct.
so they don't understand why we might come back and ask for an operating levy, because they feel like with my property values have gone up, why do you need to ask for more money? So I think it's really important, these couple slides that you shared, I think it's really important to make sure we do some kind of community education on this point before we even talk about going back to the community for an operating levy, because understanding that we have actually been operating, if you will, on a fixed income since 2016, our property taxes have really been nominally increasing, only maybe with new construction and some other things that have taken effect, but we've effectively been on a fixed income as a school system from our property taxes for the last 7 years. And that's how school funding works. You get a couple of years of surplus, then a couple of years of deficit, but most people really don't understand that process. So whatever we can do, I know Mallory's not here tonight, I don't think, but I do think that communication, there's a couple of, I think, really important data points that we could be highlighting about the effective millage rate, and the fact that please know your schools are not getting any more income with because the property tax increases are going to hit people in January. It's an important time to explain that the schools aren't getting any more money, because if you look at your line, I had people question me that there's like, that can't be true. And they went back and they looked at their property tax bills for the last 5 years and they said, oh my gosh, you were right. The schools aren't getting any more money from me for the last 5 years, even though my property taxes went up for the last 5 years. It all went elsewhere. So sorry to pontificate, but I really do think these are really important points that you have articulated here. I also just wanted to say, I really love the second to last slide, the chart with the solid yellow line and the green cash position, because this is really a guidance level for us on this. If you had one chart to say the health of the district operations and where should we be and when do we need to make a decision on operating levy, this would be the guiding chart that I would be
Yes.
looking at. I think this is really tells a very wonderful story all at once. And I do think this one is a really great chart. So thank you very much for that. All right, I'll stop there.
Mrs. Logan.
Sorry for
Mrs.
taking
Logan,
so much
can you-
time.
That's
but-
also, it's a very, very important what you just said. Everything you said was
Mhm.
right on point and very important. And the word is called the words are called tax reduction factor. And that's exactly right. I think almost every single person I've ever spoken to thinks that when their property values go up, our school district gets more money based off of that. And that is not correct because of the tax reduction factor in House Bill 920. But I just wanted to point out that just a question, actually, just sort of a conversation, additional data possible for May to think about in all of this. A couple things that just come to my mind. The enrollment study. I mean, how does that impact us? Can you just, in just a general summary, if we did have such a large, it sounds like we've had 3, almost 4 times the increase of what we maybe expected. So what does that do for us? If that continues to grow like that, how does that impact us?
So the Fair School Funding Plan is based on how many students you're educating. So that's the first premise of it. So if we're educating more students, then our base amount will increase the amount we should receive. So if we're educating more kids, the funding from the state should equate to more dollars. So that's the very basic way to explain that.
And then if the people are owning homes, then that would also impact as well,
So,
or no?
so are you saying that if,
Property taxes.
so the way that the state funding works is, yes, it's all based on number of kids you're educating. And then it's a very complicated way of, here are all the inputs and we figure out how much it costs to educate a child in Sycamore. and you multiply it by the number of kids and you come up with a figure. Here's how much it costs to educate children in Sycamore schools. Then what they do is they figure out the distribution. What should be the local share and what should be the state share. If our valuation per student increases, then it looks like our wealth increases, we're wealthier. And it also is dependent upon the earnings of our community members. So if we become wealthier by income and wealthier by property, then that formula also takes into account our wealth on that distribution of what's state share versus local share. So it's, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think it does. I just think I think that's going to be, something that we really need to understand better. I think we have a generational shift going on in our school district. We have new construction. We'll have different, we'll have more apartments. We'll have maybe more condominiums in the different parts of our community. So just understanding that impact as well as a board, I think is something just for us to understand so that we can know that too.
Thank you, Mrs. Bitter.
Mrs. Logan, can you just explain to the community the importance of the cash reserve?
Yes. So the cash reserve is just, and I think we talked about it a little bit with the child nutrition update as well. So, she talked about last year, they actually spent more than was brought in because they went through this huge transition of all kids ate free to now children, we're collecting those funds, and we actually saw an operating loss there. If we would not have had cash, how do you make payroll? How do you do all of those things? So it's very important. And I applaud Sycamore Schools for having a board policy with a cash balance goal, because not all school districts have that in policy that says that we should have 3 months of cash in the bank in case something happens. And you might say, what's going to happen? Well, it happened not that long ago. We saw reductions, from the state budget, and all of those things were taxes. We rely on tax revenue. So all of these things come into play, but just like you do at home, where you have a savings account and you should have money set aside, we need to have those dollars set aside for our stability as well.
And I think just it, bears repeating that if we did not have that policy, if we did not have a healthy cash reserve, we may not have been able to, as a district, respond so effectively to COVID in 2020 and 2021.
Yes.
So I just don't want the history of that to be lost, because I think sometimes there's a impression in the community that that's just money that's just there and that it should be spent, but there's a reason why we have it there.
And I will also say that if you're looking at benchmarks, GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, their recommended minimum for all all governmental entities is a minimum of 60 days. So that's the minimum. And we have here 30 days beyond that. So I think it's in line with what we should be looking at. Yeah.
Very, very good presentation. Thank you so much.
I have a couple of quick questions for you. On the notable expenditure assumptions slide, I guess I can see the increases for OPC and SEA and the healthcare and operating transfers. I think it would also be helpful to understand what percentage increase is included for the forecast for administration and what our staffing assumptions are going to be going forward. Are we looking at a flat head count? Is it increasing, decreasing? Which ways is it going up? Is it going up with which groups, and how? I think those would be helpful to add into the mix.
I totally agree with you. That whole staffing piece is part of that deeper dive, which we need to have a conversation about, which is like the total full-time equivalencies for all of those different classifications of employees in our district, and where are we now? And what are we predicting that we're going to need in the future? And so I agree. And so
So taking that,
forthcoming.
so taking that deeper dive would actually require someone to come to the financial retreat in February to actually learn about that.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
I would like to make a comment about just my concern about just general legislative changes and just the fickleness of our legislature and even just the backpack bill. I mean, if the law changes on that and we are suddenly responsible for funding that, that would make a big impact on our district, on every district. And that's another reason to have a really solid cash reserve. Not that, there's so many reasons why you would want to have that, but I just want to add that to the conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I do think that's another good reason why we have a very conservative forecast on the Fair School funding plan, that you're not assuming that it's going to 100% soon. And that gives us a little buffer. It's probably 50-50 each way. So I think that's smart.
Yeah.
Any final questions for Mrs. Logan?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 7A, I would like a motion to approve the agreement with the city of Montgomery.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Lewis?
Just typical agreement with the city of Montgomery. We work with them on telecommunications and infrastructure, and Mr. Long does a great job partnering with our city partners. Great example of joint community partnerships and, shared services. So just a continuation of an existing agreement.
Any questions from the board? Hearing none, Mrs. Logan, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye, motion passes. Can I have a motion to approve the agreement with Rashwana Sadler?
So moved.
Second.
And just as written in the agenda, to provide direct instruction, identified in a evaluation team report for a particular student's needs.
Any questions from the board? Mrs. Logan, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye, motion passes. Can I have a motion to approve agenda item 7A, change order for Sycamore Junior High construction project?
So moved.
Second.
I don't know who that. Okay.
Back and forth.
Was that you, Lynn? Okay. It doesn't
Mr.
matter.
Lovell.
This is a change order based on a design concern that we had in regards to airflow in our science rooms in the junior high. So this is a fix for that.
Any questions from the board? Mrs. Logan, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye, motion passes. Can I have a motion to approve agenda item 7D, the contract with Spectra Contract Flooring?
So moved.
Second.
So you're going to start seeing a few things coming on the next agenda items that are related to the approved capital PI fund that we've had that we approved heading into this year. So for fiscal year 24, projects that are going to be happening over the summer. This is a continuation of work that we've had for the past 3 years at Montgomery Elementary and replacing the flooring in that building. So this will be the last phase of flooring in that building.
Any questions from the board? Hearing none. Mrs. Logan, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye, motion passes. Could I have a motion to approve the high school math courses, AP, pre-calculus, and data science foundations?
So moved.
Second.
And Mr. Comerford, per board policy, we are bringing you courses for approval. So we will have the wonderful Mrs. Tompkins, who is our expert in this area to talk about these courses.
Good evening. I am very excited to present these two high school math courses for your approval this evening. The first one is AP Calculus or Pre-Calculus. So this Pre-Calculus course is an AP course that's intended for students who want to take calculus in college. This is a very high leverage course for our students and provides opportunities for just a broad range of students. So the course again is a college level course being AP. It provides students who might be on a typical high school pathway of Algebra 1 in 9th grade, Geometry in 10th grade, Algebra 2 in 11th grade, and they can still, as a senior, have opportunities to take a college level course as their seniors. It also provides students the opportunity to be prepared for calculus. So as they get into college, they'll be able to be prepared for that calculus level course. The second course is the data sciences course. This course is, if you remember last year, you approved an Algebra 2 equivalency course, and that course is advanced quantitative reasoning. This is another Algebra 2 equivalency course. So this course is intended for students who may not be on a college pathway that requires calculus, but will need those that Algebra 2 equivalency and maybe have different career aspirations. So this course is the data science focuses on data to make predictions and decisions. It certainly is a course that would be applicable to a student who might be interested in STEM or STEAM computer science courses. I want to commend our high school math department, and the high school department chair, Kylie Hoffman. This department in particular is always on the lookout to provide more opportunities for a wide range of students, and not only as they're in high school, but as they continue their college and career pathways post-high school. Any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Tompkins. I can say from experience in that the data science is a very hot
Yes.
topic
yes.
right now in the industry.
Yes.
So I'm glad to see this being added to our curriculum.
I'm just thrilled.
Uh-huh.
That's great.
It's very exciting. And again, thanks to the high school, this really is, the math department is very active in seeking these opportunities for our students.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Hearing none, Mrs. Logan, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye, motion passes. Moving on to agenda item 7F, the authorization to bid Sycamore High School tennis court replacement project.
So moved.
Second.
This is a follow-up to previous board action for the approval of the agreement for the architectural firm Kleiningers to get us a proposal. So we are now ready to move this project to bid so that we can work on the tennis court replacement over the summer. We have been working probably for a good 3 to 4 months, working with the coaching staff, the athletic department, to really look at our courts over there. We are not changing the location. We're not changing the size or how many courts we have. This is truly a rebuild of the current courts, but obviously in the midst of this, what we want to make sure we do is we're fixing any design flaws we had in the old courts. So those of you that have been on the board for a while now, even previous to me, you know, we've been doing significant work for some water issues that we have that create cracking coming off of the concession area. So we're working really hard to make sure that we mitigate any of those issues in this new design so that we're not faced with the same issue 5 years down the way. So I'm excited to get this out the bid. Our goal is to get this work started as soon as we can. There is going to be an impact, obviously, on the season as it relates to the tennis facilities. It's a certain amount of time that we can do this. We have to have certain temperatures for the surfacing, but we are going to be leveraging the new junior high courts when those get complete. So Mr. Teets has been critical in all the conversations. He is very supportive of all of the timeframes. He's been a part of the conversation around that as well. So we feel comfortable that we'll be able to mitigate any concerns that we might have around scheduling or anything like that.
Of the reigning state champion boys tennis.
Absolutely.
Just to clarify, Mr. Lovell, this isn't to approve the spend. This is just to approve to go
To
for
go to
bids.
bid. Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board? Mrs. Logan, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye, motion passes. Mr. Lewis, Superintendent Other.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Comerford. Just a couple of items. Last night, our Sycamore Orchestra got to partner with CCM from the University of Cincinnati, and it was an amazing show. Our students got the opportunity to be led by Maestro Gibson, who is a world-renowned conductor of the orchestra, and it was the Philharmonia Orchestra from the University of Cincinnati. So they played side by side with obviously students that have made this part of their college path. And, you know, just want to say thank you to Dr. Santangelo, Mr. Otto, Dr. Ewing, and Mr. Lewis for all the work that they put into last night. And it was a packed house. It was standing room only. And also thank you, Mrs. Bitter. I know you were present, myself, Mr. Porter was there, Mr. Ovington was there. It was a great opportunity for our students. So I'm so thankful that our music department really focuses on providing opportunities for the whole child and how much they put into. And I said to Dr. Santangelo today, I was at the high school, and I said, how do you guys keep coming up with these unique opportunities? So I know those don't happen at every other school district. So kudos to all of them. Last week, I was able to catch 12th Night, the performance of the fall performance of the theater. It was fantastic. So kudos to Mr. Wapham and the cast. Our marching band was in Orlando, their big Disney trip, and I am so thankful that they had a great time. They had a great experience. I talked to some of the marching band members today. They said it was wonderful and was, you know, again, represented Sycamore so well there. Putting something on your calendar, just want to, we're working with the Business Advisory Council to have our first business and community partnership breakfast. We're looking at February 22nd, 2024. So more details to come on that in the future. And then typically I wouldn't do this, but I think it's special. I want to congratulate our friends to the north, Kings Local Schools. Their girls volleyball team won the state title. It is the first time a public school has won the volleyball championship since 1994, which the last time was Lakota. So Southwest Ohio is always well represented, but I think it's awesome that a public school who has to bring kids only from their boundaries to compete, beat out schools that can recruit kids from all over the area. So congratulations to them. We did get to see the King's superintendent. He said it was a very special run and it was so much fun. We got a chance to talk to him at OSBA. So thank you. And that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Can I just ask one quick question? Mr. Lewis, just a follow-up question from the last meeting. Some people contacted me wondering what the update was on the bathroom situation at the high school. Some parents from that, because you mentioned it during the meeting. So I just wanted you to have the opportunity to make sure you.
Yeah, I'll let Mr. Lovell address that item.
Yes, thank you. So we obviously, after the meeting, I think I had told you I would go back and kind of investigate and see what was going on. After kind of working with that and understanding what changes were made, we instructed our staff to go back and revert the bathroom to the way it was. We know we've worked with our building administration. That is in process. I can't stand in front of you and say it's been completed yet, but we're working towards it.
Thank you so much.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from the board? Moving on to agenda item 8, personnel consent agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the personnel consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Logan, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bitter or Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye, motion passes. Moving on to agenda item number 9, treasurer's agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the monthly financial report from October of 2023?
So moved.
Second.
Logan?
I really don't have any other updates on that other than the 5-year forecast. But if you have questions about that monthly report, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions? Hearing none, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye, motion passes. Moving on to the treasurer's agenda, could I have a motion to approve the 5-year forecast?
So moved.
Second.
Any additional comments or questions? Thank you for the presentation earlier. Mrs. Logan, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Thank you.
And we have tabled the OSBA Capital Conference recap, given the tragedy that occurred on Tuesday. With that, the meeting is adjourned.